Have you ever woken up one morning, looked in the mirror and thought, I feel fine, but something's different down there? Maybe you've noticed things don't quite respond the way they used to. Or maybe you're wondering, is this normal for my age, or is something wrong? You're not alone. Every week I meet men in their 70s and 80s who ask me that very question. Some whisper it with embarrassment, others joke about it. But beneath the humor, there's always the same quiet concern. What's happening to my body, and can I do anything about it? Let me tell you about one of them, George. 76 years old, retired engineer, healthy, active, still mowing his own lawn. George came into my office one morning, sat down and said, "Doc, I'm not dead yet, but my soldier seems to think otherwise." We both laughed, but his eyes told me he wasn't joking. Now, before we go any further, let me properly introduce myself. I'm Dr. Nolan Easton, and for over 30 years, I've helped men navigate the ups and downs of aging, physically, emotionally, and intimately. I've seen how the fear of losing manhood can quietly eat away at confidence and connection. But here's the truth. Most men over 75 don't realize what's actually normal when it comes to erections. So let's clear the fog. At 75, the body has already been through decades of wear and adaptation. Testosterone levels have gently declined, circulation slows, and nerve sensitivity isn't quite what it was at 40. Erections become less spontaneous, especially morning ones. It can take longer to get aroused, and maintaining firmness might require a little more time or stimulation. That, my friends, is normal aging physiology. It doesn't mean you're broken. It means your body is shifting gears. Think of it like this. At 75, you're driving a classic car. The engine still runs beautifully, but it needs the right care, attention, and fuel to keep performing. But here's where many men go wrong. They assume any change means failure, and that belief alone can destroy their confidence faster than any medical condition. George had fallen into that trap. He'd started avoiding intimacy altogether because he thought his body was done. His wife, Margaret, felt rejected. Their closeness faded. When he told me that, I leaned forward and said, "George, what you're feeling isn't just physical, it's emotional and it's reversible." Now, before we go deeper, if you're watching this and thinking, that sounds familiar, I want you to do something small for me. Tap that thumbs up button below. It helps me know these conversations matter. And if you haven't already, subscribe and tap the bell icon. I go through your comments personally, and when you write yes or no under these videos, it helps me understand exactly what you're struggling with so I can tailor the next one for you. All right, let's get back to George. When we started talking through his symptoms, something stood out. He still had sexual thoughts, still felt desire, and could get partially erect, but not as firm as before. No pain, no sudden loss, no swelling. That's the pattern of normal age-related change. But here's the other side, the not normal signs that men often ignore. If erections vanish suddenly, almost overnight, that's a red flag. If you lose all sensation, experience pain, or notice curvature or deformity, that's not typical aging. That's a signal your body's trying to tell you something. Often it points to a circulatory issue, nerve damage, or even early signs of heart disease. You see, your penis is like a thermometer for your cardiovascular health. It's one of the first places reduced blood flow shows up. So when erections weaken sharply, it can be your body's early warning sign, not just for sexual health, but for your heart and arteries. That's what I explained to George. I said, before we assume this is just age, let's make sure your heart's not sending us a quiet message. We ran a few simple tests, blood sugar, cholesterol, blood pressure, and hormone levels. Turns out, his testosterone was low, but his bigger issue was circulation. His arteries were stiffening, something that happened slowly and silently over years. Once we addressed that, things began to shift. Now, I don't want you to think this is all doom and gloom. The beautiful thing about our bodies is that they want to heal and adapt, even in our 70s and beyond. When you start improving your circulation, your erections often improve right alongside it. That's because erections are 80% blood flow, 10% hormones, and 10% mindset. Miss one of those pieces, and performance suffers. But when all three work together, even at 75, you can have satisfying natural intimacy again. What amazed me about George wasn't how quickly he improved, but how his confidence came back. He began taking daily walks, added more healthy fats to his meals, and worked on reducing stress. Within a few months, he and Margaret were holding hands again, laughing, and yes, making love again. He said something that stuck with me. "Doc, it's not about being 20 again. It's about feeling alive again." And that's the key. After 75, it's not about chasing youth. It's about understanding your new normal so you can keep enjoying life without fear or shame. But to do that, you first have to recognize what's normal versus what's not. And that's what this video is really about, helping you spot the difference so you can act with clarity, not confusion. When men start to understand that erections after 75 don't have to disappear, that they simply change form, they stop feeling hopeless. And once that fear leaves, the body often responds better. Because stress, performance anxiety, and self-doubt are some of the most powerful erection killers out there. So, if you've been silently worrying, if you've started to avoid intimacy because you're unsure what's happening, remember George's story. He didn't give up, and neither should you. You see, your body's trying to cooperate. It just needs you to listen, support it, and give it the right environment. That's what we'll be uncovering as we go along. How to do that naturally, safely, and without shame.
When George came back for his follow-up, he looked different. Not just physically, though he'd dropped a few pounds, but in his posture, his presence. His shoulders were relaxed, and there was a spark in his eyes again. He said, "Doc, I didn't realize how much my mind was involved in this whole thing." And he was absolutely right. Most men think of erections as something purely mechanical. Blood in, blood out. But at 75 and beyond, your brain plays a far bigger role than you might think. In fact, the biggest barrier to strong erections after 75 isn't always physical. It's mental conditioning. Let me explain. As men age, the pressure to perform doesn't go away. It just changes shape. We start worrying about whether our body will cooperate, whether our partner still desires us, or whether we're too old for intimacy. That quiet, looping worry, sometimes unspoken, sometimes buried deep, creates tension. And tension is the enemy of arousal. You can't force an erection into existence by willpower. The body needs calm, confidence, and connection. But the modern man at 75 often carries decades of self-expectation. He remembers his younger self as a benchmark, and every time he falls short, he feels less like himself. That's what George was feeling. He'd spent months believing he was failing as a man. He didn't talk to anyone about it, not even Margaret. That silence created emotional distance, and that distance in turn made arousal even harder. It's a quiet cycle that so many couples fall into after decades of marriage, especially when physical intimacy starts to change. Now, when we began addressing the emotional side, I gave George an assignment. I told him, this week, don't try for sex at all. Just connect. talk, laugh, touch without expectations. He looked skeptical at first, but the next week he came in smiling. He said, "Doc, it felt like we were dating again." You see, what happened there wasn't just emotional, it was biological. When men engage in affectionate touch without pressure, their body releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone. That softens stress, improves blood flow, and calms the nervous system, all essential for natural arousal. That's something I wish more men over 75 understood. Erections aren't simply a function of testosterone. They're a reflection of balance. Balance between mind, body, and heart. Now, that doesn't mean the physical side doesn't matter. It absolutely does. But when you tackle the emotional side first, your body often follows naturally. In George's case, once he stopped judging himself and started focusing on connection, his confidence came back. And confidence, at any age, is nature's best performance enhancer. Now, let's shift for a moment and talk about what the body is actually doing at 75. Physiologically, blood vessels lose flexibility. The inside of them, called the endothelium, becomes less responsive to nitric oxide, the key molecule that helps blood vessels relax and fill the penis with blood. That's why it may take longer to get an erection or to keep it. But here's the empowering part. That process can be improved. You can literally train your body to improve blood flow again. How? Through simple daily habits. Walking every day. Eating foods rich in antioxidants like berries, olive oil, and leafy greens. Reducing processed sugar, which damages those delicate blood vessels. And yes, pelvic floor exercises. Most men don't realize the same muscles women train for bladder control are the ones that support stronger, longer-lasting erections. George started doing these small things, just 15 minutes of walking daily, stretching, and cutting back on his nightly dessert. Within weeks, his circulation improved, not only down below, but in his overall stamina. He told me, "Doc, I didn't expect walking to help in the bedroom, but it did, because it helped everywhere else first." Now, I know some of you watching may be thinking, "I've tried all that and it didn't work." And that's understandable. Many men do these things without addressing why they're doing them. If your motivation is fear of failure, fear of disappointment, the body senses that stress. It closes off rather than opens up. That's why I always tell my patients, work on restoring calm before chasing performance. And here's something most men don't hear from their doctors. Your sense of intimacy and arousal doesn't have to depend on penetration. I've seen couples rediscover connection through slower, more sensual touch, shared laughter, and conversation. When pressure is removed, pleasure often returns. That's the gift of this stage of life. You finally have time, patience, and wisdom. You know what truly matters: connection over conquest. Now, if you're watching this and you're thinking, "I wish I had that kind of connection again," do me a favor, hit that like button right now. It helps more men find this message. And leave a simple yes or no in the comments, because your feedback helps me know what's resonating and what you'd like me to dive deeper into next time. Let's come back to something very important. When you're 75 and notice changes, don't immediately assume it's just old age. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's your body asking for help. For instance, when a man develops erectile problems suddenly, especially if morning erections disappear completely, it can be an early clue to heart disease or diabetes. That's your cue to get checked, not to panic, but to prevent. I always say this to my patients: your penis is like a smoke alarm. When it stops responding, it's not the problem, it's the messenger. When George's blood tests revealed circulation issues, we didn't jump to medication. We started with lifestyle, then added a mild natural supplement for nitric oxide support. Within 3 months, his numbers improved and his confidence soared.
When George told me his erections were finally returning, slowly, steadily, and naturally, he said something that made me pause. He smiled and said, "Doc, it's not just that I can perform again, it's that I feel connected again, to myself." That right there captures what this stage of life is truly about. After 75, it's not simply a question of function, it's a question of connection. Connection to your body, your partner, and your sense of masculinity. And when that connection fades, it can take a toll on your confidence, your mood, even your purpose. But here's what most men don't realize. The body never truly forgets how to respond. It just needs the right environment to do so. You see, erections are a beautifully orchestrated event between your nerves, hormones, blood vessels, and emotions. When any one of those systems gets out of sync, the whole performance struggles. And by 75, several subtle changes converge at once. Slower circulation, lower testosterone, and often side effects from medications. Let's talk about that last one for a moment, because it's one of the most common yet overlooked culprits. When I reviewed George's medication list, I noticed something important. He'd been prescribed a beta blocker for mild blood pressure issues years ago. Now, beta blockers are life-saving drugs for many men, but they can also blunt sexual response by reducing blood flow and nerve signaling. After discussing it with his cardiologist, we found an alternative that controlled his blood pressure without dampening his libido. Within a few weeks, he noticed a difference. Not dramatic at first, but enough to make him feel hopeful again. That's something I want you to remember. Never stop or change medication on your own, but do talk to your doctor. Because sometimes the barrier isn't your body, it's a pill bottle. Now let's talk about hormones. At 75, testosterone levels are often 40 to 50% lower than they were at age 30. That's natural. But when they dip too low, it can affect not just erections, but energy, mood, and motivation. The tricky part is, symptoms can creep in slowly, fatigue here, irritability there, until one day you realize you just don't feel like yourself anymore. I tell my patients this all the time. Low testosterone isn't about losing manhood, it's about losing balance. For some men, natural lifestyle changes like improving sleep, reducing belly fat, and managing stress can boost levels enough to restore normal function. For others, medical evaluation and careful hormone support might help. But it's never one size fits all. The goal isn't to chase high numbers, it's to restore how you feel. When George started improving his lifestyle, better sleep, more sunlight, regular movement, his testosterone climbed naturally. No injections, no medication, just giving his body what it needed. And here's something fascinating that most men don't realize. Sunlight on your skin helps your body produce vitamin D, which directly supports testosterone production. Even a simple walk outdoors can make a measurable difference. But there's something even more powerful I noticed in men like George, their mindset shift. He stopped viewing aging as decline and started seeing it as a stage of refinement. He said, "I've spent my whole life taking care of everyone else. It's about time I took care of me." That change in perspective is often the turning point. Because let's be honest, society doesn't talk much about men's sexual health after 75. The conversation almost disappears, as if desire just shuts off at a certain age. But it doesn't. Desire evolves, it deepens, softens, and becomes more emotional. And that's where genuine intimacy often begins. I once had a patient, Tom, who was 81. He came in embarrassed, saying, "Doc, I still think about sex, but my body doesn't cooperate." I told him, "Tom, that means your mind and your heart are still alive. That's something to celebrate." We worked on improving his circulation and easing his anxiety, and within months, he and his wife, married for over 50 years, started enjoying closeness again. He told me, "It feels like love, not performance." That's what I wish more men understood. Your value as a man doesn't end when erections change. In fact, for many, this stage of life brings a deeper form of connection, less about proving, more about feeling. Now, some of you might be wondering, but Doc, is it still normal if I only get partial erections or none at all? Here's the honest answer. At 75 and beyond, variation is completely normal. Some men still have strong, spontaneous erections. Others need more direct stimulation. Some rely on medication or devices for assistance. And some shift toward more emotional and sensual intimacy without penetration. All of those experiences are valid. The problem arises when men assume that needing help means failure. It doesn't. It means your body needs partnership, not punishment. When George first started seeing improvements, he still had off days. But instead of feeling defeated, he learned to approach it differently. He told me, "Now when it doesn't happen, I don't panic. I just focus on enjoying the moment." That calm acceptance actually improved his consistency because stress wasn't sabotaging him anymore. So here's my message to you. Don't measure your worth by firmness. Measure it by connection, by presence, by the courage to keep showing up with patience and curiosity. If you're watching this and any of this hits home, give this video a like. It helps more men see that they're not alone. And drop up yes in the comments if you believe intimacy after 75 is still possible, because your words might just give another man hope. Now, let's talk briefly about something that rarely gets mentioned: circulation training for erectile health. A few months after George first walked into my office, he returned, not for another checkup, but to say thank you. He looked years younger. His skin had a healthy glow, his steps were lighter, and Margaret, who joined him that day, couldn't stop smiling. They sat together, fingers intertwined like teenagers. George said, "Doc, I realized this whole journey wasn't about fixing one part of my body. It was about finding myself again." And that, my friends, is the moment every man deserves to reach. See, the truth about erections after 75 isn't about how often or how firm. It's about understanding your body's language, what it's saying, what it needs, and what it's capable of with the right care. Too many men give up the moment things change. They assume the best years are behind them, but that's rarely true. I've seen men in their late 70s and 80s rediscover energy, connection, and intimacy that feels even richer than what they had decades earlier. And it happens when they stop measuring performance and start nurturing vitality. Now, George's transformation wasn't magic. It was methodical. He worked on his circulation, his mindset, his nutrition, and most importantly, his emotional connection with his partner. And as a result, his body responded. Not overnight, not perfectly, but progressively. Let's pause on that word, progress. At this age, progress doesn't mean becoming who you were at 40. It means becoming the healthiest, happiest version of who you are now. Because aging doesn't have to mean decline. It can mean refinement, wisdom, grace. And when it comes to your erections, that refinement is about quality over quantity, connection over control, intimacy over insecurity. I once asked George what changed most for him. He said, "I stopped being afraid of change itself. Once I understood what was normal, I stopped panicking, and that alone changed everything." That's why understanding what's normal versus what's not is so important. Let's recap this from a place of simplicity and truth. At 75, it's normal for erections to take longer to happen. It's normal for them to be less firm than they once were. It's normal for spontaneous erections, especially morning ones, to become occasional. It's normal for desire to fluctuate, especially if you're tired, stressed, or dealing with other health issues. What's not normal are sudden changes, when things go from steady to completely absent overnight. When there's pain, deformity,
numbness, or total loss of desire. Those are signals your body needs attention. Not shame, not silence, but care. And here's something I want to emphasize with all my heart. Asking for help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. I've treated men who waited 10 years to bring up this topic, 10 years of quiet worry, when a few simple tests could have given them answers in days. So if you're watching this and you've been putting it off, please talk to your doctor. Ask questions. You don't have to live with uncertainty. Now, let's talk about what George did after his success, because this is where most men forget to look. Once his erections improved, he didn't stop his habits. He kept walking daily, practicing his pelvic exercises, and maintaining a positive relationship with food and sleep. He treated his health like a partnership, not a project. That's the difference between a quick fix and lasting change. He told me, "Doc, I finally feel like my body and I are on the same team." That's the kind of relationship I wish every man could have with himself. Because the truth is, you can't control every aspect of aging, but you can shape the way you experience it. You can choose curiosity instead of frustration, patience instead of panic. And when you do that, your body listens. It responds to kindness. It rewards consistency. Margaret shared something beautiful that day. She said, "We laugh more now, we touch more. It's not about sex, it's about closeness. We feel young together again." That's what this is all about, because erections at their core are about connection. They're not just about physical stimulation, they're about emotional safety, relaxation, and love. You know, I've practiced medicine for over 30 years, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that men underestimate how much emotional well-being affects physical performance. You can have perfect lab results, but if you're anxious, ashamed, or disconnected, your body shuts down. But when you approach intimacy with calm, trust, and acceptance, when you allow yourself to simply be present, your body often surprises you. Now, I know some of you watching this might feel like you've lost that spark completely. Maybe you're widowed. Maybe you're alone. Maybe intimacy feels like a memory instead of a possibility. To those men, I want to say this gently but clearly. Connection doesn't end when a partner isn't there. It begins again with you. Because intimacy isn't just physical, it's a feeling of being alive. That can come from movement, purpose, nature, or even quiet moments of gratitude. Those same hormones, those same pathways of joy and vitality, they're still in you. They're just waiting for you to invite them back. So if there's one thing I want you to take away from this entire conversation, it's this. After 75, your body isn't your enemy. It's your lifelong companion. It's still capable of pleasure, strength, and connection. It just speaks a little softer now. And if you listen, you'll hear what it's asking for: care, movement, patience, and love. George found that out the hard way. He thought his body had betrayed him, but in reality, it was calling out for attention. Once he listened, everything changed. And that's my wish for you. I'm Dr. Nolan Easton, and it's been my honor to share this time with you.